Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland, Shenzhen, just south of the Tropic of Cancer. If I sound a little bit subdued today, it's because right behind that door, my wife is taking a well-deserved nap. And so, anyway, and the title really actually fits the ambiance, because it is Psst, Don't Tell Anyone, but China has the world's biggest economy. As usual, there's a couple of really cool graphs, lots of hyperlinks. Go to chinarising.puntopress.com, puntopress. Click on the blog tab to get to the original article, or I always put the hyperlink to the article on the original SoundCloud and YouTube podcasts. So, let's get started. This graph clearly shows that China's economy surpassed the U.S. in 2014. Other sources say 2013 to 2015. Either way, the trends are not going to change. While Western mainstream media likes to rant on about China eventually being the biggest global economy around 2030 to 2040, the truth is Sinoland already became world number one in 2015, 3 long years ago. China surpassed number 3, United States, in 2014, behind number 1, Europe. Then Sinoland hit the big time in 2015, ahead of the EU and the US, and has not been looking back since. By 2021, China will have almost 1/5, meaning 20% of the world's GDP, while the EU and US will fall down to about 15% each. So, is Western media lying by saying the US is still Mr. Big? Mr. Big. And China has years to catch up? No, it's just that empire wants to always project unsurpassed power and superiority, so it uses measuring sticks that do not portray the real picture. The West uses GDP comparisons based on the current exchange rates between countries. With the US dollar and euro overvalued and currencies like the Chinese renminbi and Russian ruble undervalued, it gives a distorted picture of reality. The only accurate way to calculate comparative GDPs is by using purchasing power parities, abbreviated PPPs. PPPs take a basket of goods that would be useful around the world, like flour, to make baked goods or bread, chicken and soap, plus services like public buses, photocopies, and haircuts, to compare their local costs to average salaries in country. Clearly, a kilo of chicken in France costs differently than the same kilo in Mozambique, not to mention salaries. The idea of PPPs is not some newfangled gimmick. They go back to 16th century economists who saw the same problem when trading with other countries. A square meter of silk in China might have been worth very little in Shanghai, but cost a fortune in Europe. It made good business sense to know the comparative values of commodities, goods, and services, to arbitrage and profit from the difference. When you think about it, this kind of cost and value comparison has been going on since the dawn of humankind, with different tribes and cultures exchanging and sharing goods. Today, PPPs are the only way to truly and fairly compare economies like China and the United States, not by wildly fluctuating exchange rates. Since the more accurate PPP evaluation makes enemy countries of colonial empire richer and more prosperous, and your Anglo-land comes out looking poorer, Western big lie propaganda usually reports GDPs in exchange rate terms. The graph below shows the difference in spades. The Financial Times calculated that China surpassed the United States in PPP GDP in 2013, but in dollar exchange rate terms, it will not happen until 2031, 18 years later. This does not include discussing what these GDPs are made of. The United States spends more on war and arms than the next 8 to 10 countries combined, with 1,000 military installations and 250,000 soldiers occupying most of the countries of the world, while its national infrastructure is falling apart at the seams. China has one military base in Djibouti, and to protect its shipping fleets from pirates around the Horn of Africa, while every year it is building tens of thousands of kilometers of highways, high-speed train lines, metros, bus systems, bridges, tunnels, fiber optic and 5G communication networks. Baba Beijing now has universal health care for its 1.4 billion citizens. Americans pay GD inflated rip-off prices for profit-driven medical needs. Countries also calculate GDP differently. Britain includes criminal activities like illegal drugs and prostitution, which makes sense for a country that controlled the biggest international organized crime drug cartel for 110 years, opium, until it was outlawed in China after communist liberation in 1949. All those umpteen billions of dollars in consumer, mortgage, student, credit card, and government interest payments that the United States' citizens and government pay every day count too. It's calculated as income for the banks, but is that productive GDP? China prints its own money, so does not borrow from the oil bankster Rothschilds and Rockefellers to go into public debt. U.S. government interest payments account for a big chunk of every annual budget. Chinese citizens' debt per capita is small compared to Americans, and they have one of the highest savings rates in the world. Not that China wants to flout itself as being the world's biggest economy. In fact, Baba Beijing loves being number 2, officially, of course. This is Jeff J. Brown signing out from China Rising. Please put this on your social media. Sign up for the email on this page, the blog page, if you get to China Rising. There's a lot of disinformation and absurd propaganda out there about the way the world works, and the only way to understand it is to understand how China works, and the way to find out how China works is to follow websites like China Rising Radio Sinoland. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I did